Well, the final college football playoff bracket has been released, and the Texas Longhorns are not in. I only say that because I am out here wearing my Longhorns gear. Those of you guys know me, I'm a UT alum, big Longhorns fan. Um, am I surprised? No. Uh, Texas had their opportunities this season and didn't take advantage of it at the best they can. And love the way they finished the year. Love the win against A&M to end the season. And the Florida loss, though, is going to hang really, really heavy on this team. And that Florida loss looks worse and worse as you go along. So let's talk about Texas first before we get into the whole bracket, my reaction to everything going on. I think you have two conversations about this with the Horns. One, just focus on Texas. The Horns had their chance. The Horns had their opportunities this season. And in some cases, lost a game they shouldn't have lost. Played tough early on against a really good team at Ohio State. Played alongside Georgia in Athens. And then the bottom fell out. And they lost by quite a big margin there. And then you have a couple wins that they were great gutty wins that you're proud of the guys having. But Mississippi State, Kentucky wasn't really as impressive as it should have been, right? But then you have the OU win. You have the win in Austin against Vanderbilt. And of course, you have the one against A&M to end the season. Love those wins. That was great. So, but Texas should have taken care of the business against the Gators, and they did. Period, full stop. I told people after the Georgia game, I was not going to whine and cry if the Horns got left out, and I'm not going to do that today. Period, full stop. I think it does lead to a conversation about what athletic directors and stuff will do going forward if the precedent is set that 10-2 is what gets you in. So then they were going to weigh, like, well, do we want a big boy game to start the season? Or, so you want to play Ohio State? Or do you want to insert team you feel like you can beat here? And by the end of the year, yeah, you had the Florida loss, but you lost to Georgia, not in the SEC championship. But it's just two losses. You're 10-2. You got to win over Oklahoma, Vandy, A&M. Do I think Texas is in if you flip Ohio State for whoever and you beat them? Probably so. Now, that's not the reality we live in. So you got to deal with reality on reality's terms. So that's, once again, I'm not whining and crying about it. But I do think may see some athletic directors going forward, depending on how the format changes or whatnot, where they're going to weigh that option and basically think to themselves, would it be beneficial to schedule someone you think you can beat or take the risk and play Ohio State? Me personally, I want to still play Ohio State. I want to play Michigan. I want to see Texas step outside the non-conference, challenge themselves, create those awesome marquee matchups in the non-conference that really gets us all excited for the season, right? But we'll see where this goes with all of that, if that's what the committee is saying, that 10-2 really is what matters. So that's the Longhorns part of it. That's Texas had their opportunities, didn't take advantage of it. We'll see what the fallout is from all of that stuff. Reacting to the rest of the bracket, though, and of course the main focus there at the back end, the Miami, the Notre Dame, and the Alabama situation. Like in years past, the committee is going to take the path of least resistance, the path that not necessarily that most people won't get mad about, but the one that they feel like they can more easily justify. So Alabama plays Georgia in the SEC championship, and they get smoked. Georgia dominates them. They win 28-7. Bama doesn't look good. They haven't really looked great, down the stretch a little bit. And yet, they came into the college football rankings ranked number 9, and today they are still the 9th seed. Committee is sending a very strong case. They're trying to protect conference championship games and not punish teams for playing in the conference championship. So while Alabama did not look good, so the last thing we've seen is them not really playing well against Georgia, they don't get punished. Now, it's not the same for everybody, because Brigham Young, they play Texas Tech, Red Raiders work them in Arlington, and BYU's out. And I don't necessarily disagree with that decision, but if I'm a BYU fan, I understand the frustration. There's a double standard. Alabama, not only did they have an SEC loss, they had a terrible loss to open the season, losing to Florida State. But they clearly want to protect those conference championship games, and I understand the logic of it. Those are bonus games. That is a game. If whatever tiebreaker, let's say A&M had beat Texas and Bama was at home, Bama would still be in. So I see it from that perspective. The big one, of course, is the Miami-Notre Dame situation. And once again, path of least resistance when it comes to, well, if we're having a conversation, if we're going to leave Bama in because we don't want to punish a conference champion, then the conversation, there's one spot left. It's Notre Dame and it's Miami. And there's a big glaring data point that you have. They played each other and Miami won. And I think it's pretty clear that was the deciding factor. And that logic tracks. If you're Notre Dame, though, there's the frustration of, well, Notre Dame has been ranked in front of them in almost every poll going forward, even going back to last week. So this becomes more of a conversation, not just about what's on the field, but the process of how we release these weekly polls. It becomes a broadcast television conversation, right? Because this is a TV show. And on Tuesday nights, everybody has a fun time looking and trying to see who their team's going to be. But in doing so, the committee kind of showed their hand. Because up until this week, they had Notre Dame ahead of Miami. Well, both teams did not play on Saturday. And now they flipped. Miami's in, and Notre Dame is not just ranked lower than them. Notre Dame's out. They're not going. Which now tells you, if you're the Fighting Irish, after those two close losses to A&M and to Miami, their season, at least as a playoff team, was already over. They won 10 games in a row after that, looked dominant through most of them, and they're done, and they're not in. Now, if you're Notre Dame, because you get to control your schedule, are they going to start doing some scheduling changes? Maybe you don't put A&M. Maybe you don't put Miami. Maybe you do try to get away from USC. Whatever you want to do. It's a process situation, and it becomes a logical situation for people of wait a second, what did Notre Dame or Miami do at home that would dictate the flip? Path of least resistance. In a way of, well, head-to-head Miami won. And I totally get that. But if you're a Fighting Irish fan, I understand the frustration across the board. The other issue is the group of 5 teams, Tulane and James Madison. Under the current format, with Duke winning the ACC and not being ranked high enough, they're not in. Of course, Virginia's not in, which means, well, ACC conference champ is not in. Opens up those 2 last slots. That means the 2 group of 5 teams get in. So Tulane's in. They're going to play Ole Miss, a team that beat them by 5 touchdowns. And James Madison's going to go to Eugene to play Oregon. I do think it's funny, and I will stand and correct if I see differences like this. When March Madness comes around, there's 68 teams. Everyone outside of their own team seems to really enjoy the Cinderella stories. They really want to see the St. Pete's and things like that. The George Masons. They want to see, can they make a run? Wouldn't it be so fun? I'm not really seeing that reaction to the Cinderellas of college football. It seems as though the reaction outside of just the teams that are in, but just college football fans in general, is, what are we doing? Really? This is what we're doing here? And I don't see the love for the little guy as much in college football as you do for college basketball. So we'll see. They're going to play the games for real. If those 2 games are blowouts, look for more format changes to come along. And we're going to have that conversation about that kind of stuff and whatnot. But we'll see. But I haven't really seen a lot of love for the JMUs and the Tulanes. And of course, if you're Notre Dame, you're thinking to yourself, wait a second. We're losing a spot. Not only because the committee decided to change their mind or whatever at the end, but because of a formatting situation, James Madison is in, and we're out. We'll see what happens. It's interesting. It does make things fun. It also makes things frustrating. But once again, just to make it clear on the Texas side of things, the Horns had their chance. And, you know, I like this team a lot. This team got a lot better. Do I think, like a Notre Dame, like a Texas, like a Vandy, are those three teams that if they got in, would Ole Miss or Oregon rather play the teams they have now, or would they rather play Notre Dame, Texas, or Vandy? I think they take the draw they got right now. But that's the format's product. And just because one team might be better on paper, I'm still a guy that says the season has to matter. The games have to matter. And even if it hurts my team, these seasons are cyclical. They play off each other. I don't want to set a precedent to where down the road, maybe my team gets looked over because someone says, yeah, but we think that team would beat you. So I do think things will change. I think having two of those group of five teams in is going to cause some issues, and especially if those games are blowouts. Forget about the sport. Broadcasting, the networks didn't pay for that. So that's my thoughts so far. We'll see what happens going forward. And hey, college football still goes on.